It's working? Okay.
I think it's working. So some great familiar faces here. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm Tibby. I'm one of the co-founders of Key Investment Partners. I think we've got a really special event for you guys here today. So to give you guys just a little bit of background, we're going to start off with about a 15 to 20 minute presentation on the current state of the cannabis markets, kind of who Key is, how we tackle the space, etc. And then we're going to bring up a group of panelists up here to discuss, challenges, the future of the industry. We'll talk about some current events. If you guys saw Biden's recent announcement, what we think that means for the cannabis industry overall, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. But to kick it off, again, one of the co-founders here. A little bit of background on myself. Traditional financial path. I started my career at Goldman. At Goldman, I was focused on the public markets, working for the fundamental oh my goodness, I can't say it. The fundamental equity group at Goldman, doing bottom-up stock picking, building out GS mutual funds, and then found my way to the private markets with Partners Group. Partners about 7 or so years ago moved us out to Denver, Colorado, and I'd say a little bit to their detriment. We got to know the cannabis industry, realized a lot of the dynamics that we'll talk about here today. I also met my co-founders, Pete, who's not here today, and Jordan. And the three of us, call it circa 2018, early 2019, around the time that the Farm Bill passed, we saw a huge opportunity to jump into the space. Some of the characteristics that still exist today at that time that got us excited about the asset class was simply put, it's very capital constrained. Traditional institutions aren't investing in the space today. Just to put it lightly, the cost of capital is very high for these cannabis businesses today. I'm sure some of our panelists will talk to you about that. There was a lot of investor appetite at the time, but as we looked around the space, there weren't really a lot of great places to park your capital with. And as we started looking at deals and getting to know companies in the space, we quickly found out that even in the private markets, we weren't allowed to invest in the space at Partners Group. But that was kind of the light bulb moment for us and why we decided to support investment partners. So really trying to create the first institutionally managed fund to invest directly into the cannabis industry. So a little bit of where we've been, where we are today, and where we're going. We've raised and deployed our first fund. Nomenclature is everywhere, but kind of typically your Series B, Series C type investors, looking at our own proprietary deal flow, leading and structuring our deals from the ground up, typically getting board representation on those deals. We've done about 15 investments to date. Fund 1 is pretty much done picking the positions there. We're on the road right now, basically raising our second dedicated vehicle, targeting about 100 million for that one. So with that, I'll let Jordan introduce himself and we'll get into kind of the current state of the cannabis markets. Yeah, and privileged to be invested in pretty much every single company that would be up on the panel today as well. The only outlier there is we also brought our PR firm to the panel as well today. They've been a great group to work with. Kaylin, you can raise your hand. They've done a lot of awesome stuff for us. So whenever you see our announcements on LinkedIn or newsletters or anything, these guys are really kind of helping us lead the charge with a lot of that. So quickly, show of hands, has anyone invested in the space before? What'd you say? Loaded. Oh, gotcha. So, Jordan mentioned that it's, you can lose your money in the space quickly if you don't know what you're doing. And the truth is that there are thousands of cannabis businesses out there, and the institutionalism or the expertise of the operators widely varies. I mean, you've got the black market guys who have been wheeling and dealing for years and found themselves all of a sudden in a legal market with a license, trying to operate a real business for the first time. And then you've got, the polished Wall Street guys who never ran a cannabis business before, but they know how to run a company. And what we've found is that really marry those two groups together, getting, the OGs of cannabis mixed with kind of like the Wall Street or MBA type guys is really a happy marriage there. But it kills me whenever we talk to investors and they're like, yeah, I threw $1 million at a deal and I lost my money. And I'm like, how many deals did you look at? What was the first one? My friend introduced me to these guys. I'm like, we screened like 1,500 to do our first 10. So, you got to really, really sift through and find the right operators to work with. This is one of my favorite slides here. This is, I think, a solid representation of what the current state of the legal cannabis markets look like today. So at this point in time, you've got 38 states, including DC, that have some form of legal cannabis. So that's medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, and all of this has happened at the state level. It's all really been pushed by grassroots movement. Basically, the people saying, we want weed, right? And medical marijuana, frankly, the way I look at it is it's just a precursor ultimately to recreational cannabis. And as you look at the slide here, you'll see the color's a little hard to tell, but those darker colors are medical marijuana states. And then you kind of start to see how they turn a well, you'll see how they kind of start to turn green over time. What we're seeing is that states that come out with medical programs are more quickly transitioning to full-on recreational programs. And in the last couple of years, we're actually seeing a lot of states come online for the first time and skip medical marijuana overall and go right into recreational. Just for some statistics for everyone, Gallup polls show that something like over 90% of Americans are now in favor of legalizing medical marijuana across the board. Over 2/3 of Americans support recreational cannabis legalization as well. And then obviously last Thursday, if anybody saw the headlines, Biden, for the first time, has been extremely quiet on the issue since the election or his campaign, finally came out and said it's time to have a full federal review of cannabis laws. He asked governors to also have a review of the laws in their states with regards to potentially pardoning more folks, and he also additionally pardoned around 6,500 folks with minor cannabis federal offenses. Not that his pardon is going to fundamentally change the industry today, but what it does do is it sends a signal that the administration is willing to talk about cannabis legalization. I can tell you, as somebody who is in this day to day, we speak to all of our operators. We have relationships with pretty much all the Wall Street analysts who are reporting on the issue. It pretty much caught everybody by surprise. Last week, just a few days before the announcement, I was talking to the head of government relations at Canopy Growth, one of the largest Canadian LPs. And our whole conversation was around safe banking, which is a piece of incremental reform that we expect to pass this year. We'll touch on that later. But he had no idea what Biden was about to do. So really, really kind of caught everybody by surprise. Frankly, probably just posturing for the midterm. I think we can all see that. But nonetheless, it shows a big willingness to work with these companies. And so kind of fast forwarding, we'll talk about that. And Jordan will touch on that a little bit too. What the markets look like today. This one. So what we have today is the most mature legal cannabis industry that we've ever had. All these new states coming online. We know that there's several states with it on the ballot this November that could flip for the first time or go from medical to recreational. And the momentum is clearly in favor of ultimately working towards federal legalization. So these two lines here. So first of all, the bar chart represents legal cannabis sales in the United States over time. So 17.5 billion in 2020, 2021, 25 billion. And this year we expect sales around 33 billion. So the industry has been growing around 30+% year over year. And what this other line chart is the CMBS cannabis ETF, which is an ETF that tracks publicly traded US and Canadian cannabis companies. So you can kind of see it's been a roller coaster ride from a valuation perspective, but on the other side, legal cannabis sales and the consumer are really driving this industry forward. What this really means is that there's a huge dislocation and there's not a lot of connection between what's actually happening on the ground today from consumer demand and what's going on with valuation. So that big run up there in the middle of the chart, that's right around December 2020. What really drove that, call it 3x price movement at the ETF level, was that there was a lot of speculation that Biden was going to legalize marijuana federally. And people started pouring capital into the stock market, cannabis stocks. And then when it became pretty apparent that Biden was quiet on the issue, not going to do a lot, we've had a rundown, pretty significant rundown since then. The cannabis industry, from a public markets perspective, has been out of favor basically since Biden took office. And in the last year, such a capital constrained industry with all risk assets and frankly all assets coming down, we haven't been able to tie. So we find ourselves in a position right now where we're like, and oftentimes have dry powder. I mean, a more mature industry than we've ever had before. Operators that have now years of background, years of scaling, years of experience, and guess what? It's trading cheaper than it ever has. So we see this as really a huge opportunity at kind of an inflection point prior to legalization, where we think that this is actually going to be one of the best exposures to the cannabis that you can get. I'm going to pass it to Jordan in a second here, but one thing I want to mention about that consumer demand and how the industry is growing so quickly, one of the reasons that we got excited about the industry in the first place, when we got involved in 2019, it was a $12 billion industry. The black markets call it 150 billion in the US. We said there's no other emerging market where I know that there's 10x embedded demand from a black market that's eventually going to evolve to the legal market like the cannabis industry. And even today, this year, the black market still is massive compared to the legal market, call it 3x. If you look at a state like Colorado that's been legal for 10 years, we've done a really great job here at getting rid of the black market. Prices have come down. People don't like to touch their drug dealers for weed anymore. They go to a dispensary, the form factors have changed. The stigma has really gone away in the state. I bet everyone here knows somebody who consumes either edibles or drugs or does something, and that stigma's not quite there anymore. We expect for that to be the same across other legal states as they continue to mature. So not only are we evolving that black market demand, we're also bringing in a lot of new consumers to the industry that wouldn't have used the drug dealer before, but they're not afraid to go talk to a bud tender at a dispensary or to try a cute little edible or a macaroon or something like that that's infused with marijuana. So anyways, I'll pause there, pass it on to Jordan, and talk about some of the regulatory changes. Awesome. Yeah, let's go ahead and get the panelists up here. So we'll do about a 30-minute session with the panel, and then if you have a burning question in the middle, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll take about 10 minutes of Q&A at the end, and then we'll all stick around after the well. So kicking off, Jordan will be on the panel. I'll let everybody introduce themselves. But Jordan, you already did, so as soon as you get your mics on. So let's get started with Josh Rubin, CEO, co-founder of Day3 Labs.
It's working. Okay, cool. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here at the CFA Society. My name is Josh, co-founder and CEO of Day3 Labs. Thank you, Key Investments, for the invite and for giving us life at Day3 Labs. We very much appreciate it and still appreciate it. So just very, very short, I'm sure we're going to get into it. Day3 Labs, almost a year ago to the date. It's crazy. Yeah, it's wild. It's been a wild ride so far. Day3 Labs acquired an Israeli pharmaceutical company for their portfolio of IP technology. And so to date, we have a fully operational pharmaceutical lab with a pharma team in Israel conducting research. And when I say pharma, I mean true pharma. We're currently spearheading a trial into Parkinson's disease, studying the treatment of Parkinson's using the formulation of cannabinoids. We're literally testing it on neurons from the human brain to stimulate dopamine and stuff like that, which I'm happy to talk more about. And we're commercializing. The idea here is that we're commercializing the technology from Israel in the U.S. market because this is where the action is. Just touching on what Jordan was saying in terms of the Schedule I, and I'm sure we'll get into it. That makes it prohibitive to do any kind of research in the United States, and so Israel is actually leading the world for about 50 years now in pharmaceutical research of cannabis. And here try doing research into heroin. Like that's what Schedule I is. So it's quite complicated, but I'm sure we'll get into everything. But it's really nice to be here. It's nice to meet everyone.
Great. Pat Unziger with PharmaCann. PharmaCann is the largest privately held MSO or multi-state operator here in the United States. We've got an 8-state footprint, including the great state here of Colorado, which is the second largest legal cannabis market in the United States, behind California, but ahead of Michigan, which we have a presence in Michigan as well. And then, of course, big presence in my own home state in Illinois. We employ about 3,200 employees across our 8-state footprint, fully vertical, meaning that we grow, produce, process, and then distribute through approximately 60 retail dispensaries, as well as sell through on the wholesale market to other dispensaries. Here in Colorado, we go to market as LiveWell, and we are either the largest or a leading retailer by revenue here in the state. I came on board about 2.5 years ago. Previously, I'd been a CFO of 2 other NYSE listed companies in Chicago. Very used to operating in highly regulated environments, kind of a zero defect atmosphere, with the charge to professionalize the finance team for potential go public, as well as to help continue to raise capital. Coincidentally, I was raised in Central Illinois as a farmer in the same county where our grow is in Illinois. And if you're familiar with R.R. Donnelly, used to publish phone books. Our grow is a deconverted R.R. Donnelly facility because obviously nobody buys phone books anymore, but we buy cannabis. So I am proud to employ a large number of people in my own home county as is the economy continues to grow. And I used to always kind of be a bit of a naysayer on the whatever that was back in the kind of internet. I'm old. I'm over 50, so I can say this. But people say, the top 10 jobs today never existed 10 years ago. I was like, oh, that's bullshit. People are just kind of rebranding stuff, right? Google, right? It's an advertiser, it's a retailer, etc. I was like, wow, now I work for one of those companies, so it's kind of cool to help shape that. So I appreciate, Key Investments is being an investor in our company, and really look forward to a good dialogue here.
Well, that's going to be hard to follow up. I'm Caleb Donato, the co-founder and COO over here at the Ninth Block. We're a cannabis and emerging markets focused branding and PR agency based here in Denver. Also have offices down in Arizona. We've helped brands in Colorado, Arizona, Tennessee, pick a state, you name it. At this point, we've kind of had some experience there. Yeah.
Hello? I'll speak loudly. CFO, CEO of Capital. We are a dedicated specialty finance firm that founded in 2016, cut our team from I think about $70 million now. Equipment financing, as Vision Plus, the private equity firm that optimize our process. So we went speed to scale. I'd also like to do a quick op-ed at the CFA Society. We're my CFA charter in 2006. CFA Society. And I'd like to see, I cut my teeth with fun management like so many CFAs do. I think it's really fun and dedicated to be a long, short edge one. I would like to see more CFA charter holders switch over like I did, represent corporate finance and CFO roles or anything else roles because we're underrepresented. And the cannabis in particular is a growing industry and the CFA brand in terms of intellectual capital and has a lot of place room to run. And encourage those of you to.
Awesome. And everybody met yours. So I'm going to put you guys in the hot seat right away. And, we mentioned, right, this is a fun asset class. It's a high growth industry, but it's still an emerging market. And with that comes a lot of challenges. So with that, oh, you want me to, right here? Okay, cool. So with that, let's start down the line again and talk to me about the biggest challenges you face as a cannabis company today.
Now, do you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Apparently, I was making a lot of noise. I'm sorry. Just that rude New Yorker. Challenges in the industry today. I mean, obviously, it not being federally legal is. Everyone here talks about it. I can't remember the numbers. Maybe you have the numbers, but the capital needs versus the available capital in the industry is just. I mean, it's shocking.
We did a study. We think about 15% of cannabis companies are actually getting the financing that they're looking for. So cost of capital is very high. Believe it at that.
Yeah, and so I think from our vantage point, our focus is innovation, right? So like that's what Day 3 Labs is. We're looking at innovation. We're looking under the hood of this plant. We barely even scratch the surface of what this plant can do and what we can do with this plant. And I think one of the challenges that we have is just as an emerging market, as happens often in emerging markets, in the early days, it's kind of hard to delineate what's real and what's not. We're the smoke and mirrors and the snake oil versus, the true, this is the future of the industry. And I think a lot of people struggle with that piece. And so when we're coming into the industry with, real technology, real innovation informed by science, clinically validated, we're up against, many players who will make the same exact claims, only they made something in their kitchen with a pressure cooker, and there's no data whatsoever. And I think, for investors, it's very challenging because they're looking at this as, wait, there's 10 players here all making the same claims, all doing the same thing. How do you differentiate between them? And I think we're at a very critical point right now in the industry where people are starting to ask the right questions, where consumers are starting to ask the right questions. What's actually going into my product? What is the experience I'm going to have with this product? And what is this going to do for me holistically? And I think those questions haven't really been asked to this degree.
Yeah, I would say that the form factors that come out in any state that just legalizes is the primitive use of cannabis, right? The edibles aren't much different than when kids were in their mom's kitchen cooking up weed brownies. It's really not that different when you come out to a new state and people are smoking just packaged flowers. So the industry's got a long way to go. Companies like Day 3 Labs, I think, are really changing the game there, changing the form factor. But again, biggest challenge for you guys today? What is it?
Biggest challenge, set aside capital markets, and we can talk about that, would be the tax structure. So selling cannabis, which is obviously, we said here, a Schedule 1 controlled substance. We are known as, to the IRS, what a Section 280E taxpayer is. So we pay federal income tax and most state income tax on our gross profits. So, 2.5 years ago, when I was diligencing the business and wanted to plan out what my next career move was, our company had 108% effective income tax rate. Well, I'm not a CFA, I am a CPA. I was like, well, how does that work? And that works because none of our SG&A expenses are deductible, right? So unlike a normal business who pays income taxes on the pre-tax income, with the exception of the good state of Colorado and a few others from a state perspective, we're paying our federal income taxes on the gross profit level. So none of our SG&A expenses are deductible. And when you're fully vertically integrated, as you say, kind of like fundamental, we cannot take a tax deduct for the significant majority of the employees that we employ, right? How messed up is that? We cannot take a tax deduct for the rent that we pay on our dispensaries, because all that is SG&A. We cannot take a tax deduct for me, and maybe we shouldn't. But for the significant number of employees and what we bring to our states is job growth. The federal government turns a blind eye to that. It treats us not like a normal business. And it's really unsustainable. And if you look, not so much in Colorado, but take Illinois, for instance, my home state. Illinois prides itself with full legalization in January the 1st of 2020, and I think it was a great move, but they didn't fix the income tax structure. We pride ourselves in awarding dispensary licenses, most recently to social equity applicants. But here's your license. Now I'm going to, Governor Pritzker is going to tie a hand behind your back because you're going to pay an outsized proportion of your profits to the state and federal government. And that's just not sustainable. It's easy for me to sit up here and say, hey, we made it to the top 10. We've got the scale. We're going to be, or we are, free cash flow positive. But for all of these people who, hey, we want to right all these social wrongs, whatnot, hey, that's great. But it's all just lip service until we fix 280E. So that's probably our biggest constraint. But for 280E, I wouldn't be dressed up here today as if I'm out raising capital, because I am. I'd be in my normal work clothes, in jeans and in tennis shoes. But that is, I think, today the biggest obstacle. The good news is with the president's actions, and while there may be different motivations behind that, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's hard to get back in. I think that clears the way for some of the other folks who have been perhaps a bit obstructionist, Charles Schumer, Cory Booker, on moving forward with safe banking. We've kind of cleared the way of, the federal pardons. And again, a federal pardon for somebody smoking weed is, hey, I did it at the Washington Mall, or I did it at name your favorite national park, right? And none of those 6,500 people are in prison today. So it is, a bit for optics, but it is the spark that this industry needed to move towards more of a mainstream.
Yeah. Honestly, coming from a branding and PR perspective, it's marketing regulation. When we look at individual cannabis markets, they're all unique in what's allowed from a tax structure, from a branding perspective, from a language perspective. And so with us working in multiple markets, we have to be aware of what do we have to put on packaging? What can we say on the website? What can this brand say publicly on something as little as a social media post? I know it doesn't sound major, but when we're looking at organizations that operate in 8, 9, 10 markets, they have 8, 9, 10 different types of packaging. Those costs add up. Remember, the branding that we have is so different, and therefore the costs are so much higher. And I think that's the hardest thing is, as a business that's supporting these brands, we're the expert. And quite frankly, these regulations change on a quarterly basis. So it's keeping up with that. So how are we as a business supposed to keep up with it? How are the brands supposed to keep up with it? How are we supposed to predict out our supply chain needs well in advance for that when next year comes January 1, things are going to change. We need to be able to shift. A great example of this, we worked with a company in California several years ago, and California is not the same now as it used to be. So bear with me here. They went and did 3 runs of packaging within the first quarter because every single month they were seeing new changes to their packaging. And that's a huge change, especially now when we're dealing with backups from China. People are buying all their packaging from there predominantly to lower their costs because they know that they're going to run into headaches in a month or two. So the lack of consistent regulation is one of the biggest hurdles in my world and one of the larger costs that we see a lot of these brands try to navigate.
As a lender in the industry, the toughest challenge we face is finding quality deals to underwrite. Now, Tiffany rightly pointed out, there's a massive shortage of capital in this industry, which is true. But when you actually start to look at who you want to lend to or provide capital to, that number shrinks a lot. So we focus primarily on the lower middle market. We're doing loans in size from 500,000 to about 7.5 million, typically. What that means is we're typically the first institutional raise a lot of these borrowers have. I worked for an operator for a while as a CFO, and I saw, you could gobble together $1 to $2 million of friends and family money. And then once you grew large enough, like your PharmaCann, you could borrow from larger institutions. We'd love to lend to them because they're large and professional. But then once someone's looking for that $3 to $10 million, they're not big enough to be underwritten by a larger, AFC Gamma or Chicago Atlantic. And they're too small to pass the hat. So our challenge is to provide them financing, but they often are in kind of disarray in terms of their financial reporting, what's a proper process for a study of their quality of earnings. So we have to hold their hand in terms of kind of deciphering what do they actually look like from an economic perspective. And then once we actually figure out what's going on beneath the surface, is there something bankable there? So again, our challenge is not that there aren't enough people who need money, it's finding deals that we're comfortable lending to and the effort that it takes to lend to that lower middle market space.
Yeah, just quickly wrapped up, I'd say like most people, buying art at this time, that brought us to the point right there. It's great that Colorado utilized, we had sales, and we're helping to direct the investors from the one judge. When we get people investors, Colorado and for funding that cannabis legal or device, they're helping to setting investors, pocket capital to businesses. So again, it's more difficult to invest in running.
Awesome, thanks guys. So the overarching theme pretty much across the board is that the capital markets are really tough in the industry for one reason or another. So, but there are some bright spots in the industry. We found great companies we're invested in, pretty much all you guys, right? What are you guys doing in such a tough cap markets environment to ensure that you either are A, working towards break even or profitability, or B, ensuring that you have proper runway to get to that pivotal point of maybe safe banking, which luckily finally feels like it is going to happen maybe in the next few months. So you guys it's a special presentation today because that announcement last week wasn't meant to happen. So things are changing very quickly. But again, what keeps you up at night? How are you making sure that you've got runway? What are you doing to work towards profitability when you're dealing with paying taxes on gross profit? I mean, that's nuts. I'll start with Josh.
No, I figured start with him.
Well, I'm looking at all of it. We can go down. You guys go whatever order you want. I'll start with you, Josh.
Okay.
Don't just say you're looking at me for runway.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm here. Everyone's got checkbooks.
Points at me and pass it on.
Yeah, pass around a hat. I think across the board, everyone I know who operates in this industry right now, I mean, everyone's operating way more lean than they would ever want to. I mean, that's just the reality across the board. I think that everyone had, up until 6 months ago even, everyone I know in this industry from every vertical industry had grand plans for what the next, 6 to 12 months are going to look like. And that all went away within like 2 weeks, which was pretty amazing. I think, the way that we're approaching it again, when we're looking at the market where we are today, we're asking, how do you future-proof an investment and how do you future-proof your organization? And so when I'm looking at the industry today, you have this commoditized product, and you're seeing price compression and saturation and consolidation, all the typical things that you would see in any emerging market. But if you fast forward, how do you survive turmoil? It's through technology, it's through innovation. If you could innovate around that plant. And so, for example, when we're looking at the market today, for those of you who have consumed an edible, I don't know if anyone here consumes, but if you've had an edible, it's very different than smoking, right? You eat an edible, it typically knocks you out. It's like I said, and it's a very different experience than smoking, and there's a lot of science behind why that happens. And there is no viable, efficacious technology in the market today that actually successfully counters that. So there's a lot of stuff in the market today that people quickly put together in the pressure cookers or a little bit more advanced than that. But there hasn't been a solve for that. And so the way that we approach the market, we have a pharmaceutical grade, pharmaceutically validated drug delivery technology that we're now putting into edibles in the industry today, and view this as one step forward to really normalizing the consumption of cannabis. Because if you consume cannabis and ingest it and have a functional, enjoyable experience that doesn't force you to face plant into your couch the way an edible typically does, then maybe we open this up to the mainstream consumer, and then maybe it'll be an easier conversation on the table. And so that's sort of the broad stroke.
Your focus today is put your head down, work hard, and sell your product.
Keep your head down, work hard, and be smart. And then sell your product.
Also, believe it or not, I'm sure everybody here probably thinks that these guys touch the plant, but they've actually found a pretty creative way of getting around being licensed. So Josh's company actually is not burdened by 280E. So there is a difference between cannabis companies, plant touching and non-plant touching. So we actually consider them ancillary, although it sounds like they touch.
We're biotech.
Yeah, exactly. So what are you guys doing? You're dealing with 280E. Obviously you guys are out there finding investors, but you're also growing a big company. How are you ensuring that you have runway or working towards profitability?
Sure. So a couple of things. One, you're just having the benefit of not working in cannabis all my life, bringing in a good discipline around capital allocation and capital. How do we prioritize the focus, right? And I always like to think of it as a Bill throwaway is, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And as well, easy as that may sound, on one of the charts, for a while there's a lot of capital coming into this industry. So people thought they could do everything, and as a result, there were a lot of bad decisions made. So how do we now kind of refocus? And for us, for the next 6 to 8 months, it's focusing on our 8-state footprint, maximize the ROI out of each of those markets. So for instance, in Colorado, right? Colorado already went through a bit of a market correction and thinning. I think at one time, there were more than 1,500 dispensaries in Colorado. What are there today? Less than 700? Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. We're seeing the same phenomenon in Michigan. We're the largest wholesaler by revenue in Michigan, but we only have 2 dispensaries. So we're actually allocating more capital to Michigan because we can build out a dispensary network, capture that margin arbitrage of 30% gross margin or 33% gross margin selling product in the wholesale market versus 60% of the retail, and then take all the price volatility out of it from California Croptober when that illicit product enters the market, et cetera. So for me, it's been a lot of fun. This is what we get paid for, right? We get paid as CFAs, CPAs, we get paid to solve problems, and for us, it's basic business analysis, ROI, capital allocation, and focus. And then cost cutting, right? There was a lot of capital that came into the industry. Perhaps some of the decisions, and it was a bit of a land grab, and part of it was as well as, hey, we did the best with what we could for the tools that we had at the time. And when I say the tools that we had at the time, big learning for me, and I thought I went into this eyes wide open, but I didn't, right? And what I really underappreciated, I got the whole banking thing, and look, this is going to be a lot harder than other finance roles that I've had, but just the technology investment in the space, the access to good partners. Now, the good news is each day this industry becomes more mainstream and more folks are entering the space and getting comfortable with it. But wow, we do and continue to do, and much so each less than state, we get a lot done with just pure brute force. So there's a lot of people costs, there's a lot of friction costs, not as much automation as we'd like to see. So how can we continue to focus on those opportunities, take costs out of the system, so from a profitability, extend the runway, and then improve capital allocation.
Thank you, Patrick. And Taylor.
Well, we're definitely in a little bit of a different situation as a marketing company. We can obviously kind of have our foot in cannabis and foot in others, so we're insulated in that regard. But one thing I will say about our business and a lot of the cannabis space is it's running an efficient business. Quite frankly, a lot of cannabis operators in the early days, and even still today, have these massive expectations of returns. I mean, you guys saw the projections. It looks great. But the reality is on the ground, it is a slog. It is not as fast growing as we'd like it to be. It's not as high growth as we'd like it to be. Yes, it's growing incredibly fast. I don't want to kind of shoo away that idea. But the reality is we're still in a building phase. And don't expect that your business is going to go expand into 10, 15 states within the next year. Set reasonable expectations for your growth, your businesses, your headcount, the products you're deploying. So many people come to us and want to launch a new brand and they want to do it next month. The reality is things take time. And I think that cannabis, because there's so much opportunity, people for so long have just jumped to what that opportunity is rather than the opportunity at hand today. So I think grounding yourself is really how you survive in this industry. PharmaCann, for example, you guys have been around for a long time. You're not one of the new people that just exploded, because there's thought behind what you guys are doing. And I think that that's the most important part of cannabis. A lot of people have these great visions, but it comes down to executing it on a day-to-day basis, not on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I think he brings up a good point, because especially when capital was flowing very freely into space, you saw a lot of folks out there that just said, grow, 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 expand, 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 but they didn't do so in a way that they're actually building a really strong foundation. It's also not the industry where slow and steady wins the race. You need to kind of find that happy medium between the two. But yeah, I think certainly some of the entrepreneurs in the space need to be grounded a little bit more. Kevin, what are you guys doing to work towards profitability? Obviously, you guys aren't 280E burdened either.
Right.
You're a little bit more on our side of the aisle as an investor.
Sure. So what keeps us up at night, I guess, or me, is we're in a simple business. We borrow at X and we lend at 2X and we make the spread. Like, it's pretty simple. Executing that, particularly in cannabis, is incredibly complicated. So we're constantly kind of between raising capital and origination are the two drivers of our business. And this is a very capital intensive business. And when you're lending, it's extremely capital intensive, because that's the fuel that we use. We're balance sheet lenders. We literally need money to lend it out. So one moment we're like, we need more capital. We take care of that. Then, oh my gosh, we need to originate. Well, we could originate $100 million in 3 months if we wanted to. It's not, like I said before, it's not the origination that you want on your balance sheet. So we are in a constant flux of raising capital and then finding proper originations and back and forth. And I have not been on a cannabis panel yet. And there's various elements of the business where people aren't raising capital. And and I would be remiss to not say that we recently signed a term sheet for a very large credit facility, and we're now raising our Class B equity. And we're offering a 10% dividend and upside on an exit. So and I'm in a room full of analysts and advisors and people that control money. I can't help but mention that. And I'm pretty sure everyone else here, I know Tibby's and Jordan's funds raising capital. There's always an opportunity to put money to work in cannabis. There's just few opportunities to put money to work smartly.
Jordan, so curious what you have to say. As a fund manager, we're not dealing with the same issues, but obviously raising capital and deploying capital is our day to day. Maybe what keeps you up at night with
Yeah. I think the biggest kind of overall macro that I have, and one of the benefits obviously of farm is that we try to diversify our investments, make sure that we're not regulatory risk. I diversify by sector, having but I think just as a broad kind of proposal, the biggest concern is just duration of that we're able to get slow accessing the capital the long-term story is absolutely good. Because we learn that thread that needle alongside pretty important regulatory momentum that, is very unstable to that message.
Great. It's a similar thought process from my end too. So, you know, look, I think we all understand the opportunity here, right? This is an emerging industry. We've seen the growth. It's happening quickly. It's no longer as opaque on the walls. Cannabis will be federally legalized. The cap markets will open up. You know, when I talk about deals with Jordan, I mean, it's easy to understand the upside, but it's really, how do you protect your downside? How do you underwrite that risk? What can you do to make this a better risk-adjusted return, et cetera? A lot of the conversation right now has been focused on tough stuff. Everyone's a CFA in this room. You need to understand risk. That's what most jobs are as investors. But it is a very bright industry as well. There's a lot of great, there's a bright future to the asset class. So I'm going to switch gears and go from doom and gloom questions, what keeps you up at night, to tell me, you know, what gets you about the cannabis industry today? What makes you excited about, you know, day 3 labs of tomorrow? Gosh.
It's a great question. I mean, it's why I came into this industry to begin with. I was in business school at Hopkins, and I was looking around, and I saw a little thing on my computer that cannabis was coming to Maryland, and I didn't know anything about the industry. This was back in 2016, 2017, and I started to learn more about it. And what I saw was just opportunity. I mean, you know, I saw the Wild West shit show that was 2016, and still some vestiges today, as we know. But there's nothing like this. I mean, like to get in at this time, especially now when we've evolved to a certain point where it's not mature, but it's maturing. Like we're a little bit more mature than we were just a couple of years ago. I'd say, you know, the industry in the beginning was trying to capture, you know, those that were used to consuming from the legacy or black markets, you know, so we did that. And now we're at a stage where we're becoming more mainstream. And people are starting to recognize that cannabis is a wellness product and maybe even has medicinal properties. And consumers are starting to ask questions. And, you know, I was talking to someone who works at a company that produces cannabis but doesn't have an edible line. And they looked at me and they were like, we don't want to be another dummy with a gummy. Like there are enough gummies in the market. Like, so what does innovation look like? And I think that's a question that hasn't really been asked in this industry until now. Like, what is innovation? What does that look like? And I think it's a very exciting time. And just a plug for Day 3 Labs. I mean, that's why we're in it. I mean, we're here to really push the envelope when it comes to innovation and to really raise the bar in terms of just the whole conversation around the industry, because we really do believe in the power of this plant and the wellness properties and everything that it does, from recreation to wellness to medicinal to pharma. And I think we're at a point where, you know, we're right on the edge there. We're at a tipping point.
Great. Awesome. Patrick?
You know, for me personally, as well as, you know, for the industry, I really gravitate toward the mission of the company. Our mission is to improve people's lives with cannabis. And whether that's medicinal, recreational, whether that's through the 3,200 people that we employ today that put food on their table. So it's, for me, living in Chicago, spent all my professional career in Chicago. Where else could I find a high growth industry? And Chicago has a disproportionate number of MSOs, publicly traded MSOs headquartered. We are the U.S. weed capital. And I saw this as an opportunity to help take a company public and grow the company, and obviously a high beta opportunity, but have a very positive impact on people's lives and hopefully, quite honestly, make a lot of money in the process.
There you go.
So there you go.
Awesome. Kaylin, what about you?
I think the thing I'm most excited about is the new consumers. Even in Colorado, a market that's been open for quite a while, there are still people that have not tried cannabis because of the form factor, because there is still a little bit of a stigma there. So when we look at states like Colorado, there is still market opportunity here. There's still market opportunity in California. All these places that have been established, there's still opportunity when people innovate the way that Josh is, when they're creating new form factors or creating brands that actually speak to consumers. We look at what cannabis was when it started in Colorado. Every dispensary had a green leaf when it was called, you know, something green or 420 doctor, something cheesy like that. No one's grandparents are going there. Let's be honest. You know, we need to build brands that actually resonate with people and resonate with consumers the same way that wine, beer, a lot of these other vice industries do. They speak to who they're selling to. And so from a marketing perspective, that's exciting because we can actually be more pragmatic and more niche on what we're building. Rather than building one brand that's supposed to just sell weed, we can go and sell this innovative new product that is going to help you in X, Y, and Z way. So we're able to help people more efficiently. We're able to get more out of this plant and get it to more people, and therefore create more money or drive more money through the ecosystem for everyone. So I think it's the new people that is what's most exciting, which is opportunity on opportunity.
Yeah, I love that answer. Thank you, Kaylin. Kevin, what about you?
What I think is so exciting is just there are a lot of unique aspects of this industry. It's a product that's been around for thousands of years. I'm not particularly concerned about disruptive technology coming along and displacing cannabis, right? And that's actually really refreshing. It's exciting because we know the pathway of how much is being accepted and growing. It's kind of moving eastward, and it's a capital intensive business. So it has all the elements of an exciting intellectual journey. My parents are like red state Republicans, and just a few years ago, they're like, Kevin's a CFO of a cannabis company, their heads would have exploded. And now they're like, Kevin, so-and-so's arm hurts. Where can we get some cannabis? Like, I've seen this complete change in acceptance of it, and it's really exciting to see that. And then from an intellectual perspective, at least how it is now, a business model that works in Ohio, which is a limited license state, you could have that business model won't work or look completely different in Florida or maybe a Colorado. So there's just all these exciting elements of putting the pieces together. So that's the opportunity and the challenge of the industry.
All right, Jordan.
I'm really excited about cannabis once again. Right? And I think when you hear about going medical, yes, that's technically true. A lot of folks who are getting hard diet, for diet or have such a qualifying position, a lot of them more of a way to access. Because cannabis has been a schedule for years, that's made it almost impossible to do it. Of it, which again has been kind of what politicians say, well, there's no research, we can't legalize it. But yeah, so anyway, I think if you start to really strict and start to see the evidence that backs it up, for example, like Colorado, that's part that you get lost. Not just about the either are
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time here on the panel. So I want to open it up to Q&A now, and then I know that we've got a little bit of time left anyways. So pass the mic. Not all at once.
I think this is for Josh. Josh, I assume you're a plant touch in Israel. Yeah.
Oh, in Israel,
In
yes.
Israel, yeah.
We have
Okay,
a-
and when it seems pretty likely that it won't be a Schedule I substance for too much longer. What happens in the U.S., like kind of the pipeline, and what happens in the U.S. as we move forward to your business and as it becomes legal to do this research and development and the technology advances? Does Big Pharma get involved in a big way? What does that do to competition?
Excellent question. I love that question. So thank you. It's my favorite question of the day so far. No offense to Tibby, you had great questions. You had great questions, Tibby. I loved all your questions, but that was a great question. Yeah, I mean, so what's interesting, on what Jordan was touching on, I mean, I was like jumping out of my chair because the wellness properties, like for example, we're taking what Phase Labs is doing essentially is we're taking pharma research technologies and introducing them to a non-pharma market, right? Because this isn't a pharma market. Big pharma is not involved right now. So on the one hand, there's an opportunity. So we have in our portfolio that we have a patented sleep formulation that's just cannabis, like no melatonin, no valerian root, or any of that junk, and barely any THC, so it doesn't get you high. And it's patented, it's clinically validated, all that fun stuff. In Israel, it was meant to go through the pharma channels, but since there are no real pharma channels right now, we're going to be just bringing it to market and selling it at the store. And it's a pharma grade, it's a medication, but it's just cannabis. And I think looking at legalization here, what big change. On the one hand, there would be an influx of capital that's much needed on the pharma side. So we're conducting a trial in Parkinson's through an Israeli government-backed research program. So the Israeli government is actually funding much of our trial. If that were in America, there would be zeros on that check, like more zeros on the check. There are zeros, but there would be many more zeros on the check. And
Check's not just you.
yeah, no, there are zeros after another number, but there would be like many, many more zeros if it were in America. And the amount of research that we'd be able to do there would be, unbelievable. On the other hand, we're so behind here on pharma research that much of the science community that I speak to, that I've spoken with here, they're also in the dark about cannabis because they themselves have never done any research in cannabis. Much of my team in Israel had never tried cannabis before. They're just pharma researchers. And so they're really looking at it from a pharma perspective. THC was first isolated and identified in a lab in Israel in the late 60s, not here. So I think that there's a lot of value and potential once it is open here in terms of capital and also distribution and all that stuff. It would make it a little bit more complicated with the FDA, but that's great. But there's a long road ahead, just in my opinion, just given how far behind we are. Yeah, I think it's fair, and some of us will be ahead of the game.
When Boehner joined the board a couple years ago of, was it Canopy Growth or? Yeah, Acreage. The semi-encouraged. Oh, okay, good. Semi-encouraged, and both parties have it's kind of died, but has there been any, that you're aware of the behind the scenes push, especially in like the southern red states you mentioned, maybe approaching tobacco farmers? Could that be an area where they would push those people, if McConnell got behind, like, hey, you don't have to grow tobacco anymore, which is, we're against, like, this is a wheat crop that you can make money off.
I'd love to kind of speak to this first and pass it on. I've actually done some work in Georgia with Philip Morris tobacco growers. So they're some of the most sophisticated growers in the world. These people have master's degrees in agriculture. They know what they're doing. They're very, very excited for the opportunity to grow cannabis in certain areas. It is an economic opportunity for these people. And from the conversations I was having, the infrastructure they have only applies and is only needed during certain portions of the year. And so the goal of some of these people that I'm speaking to is that they could actually grow tobacco and then cannabis in different areas of their facilities. I don't know the reality of that, but I can say that I've personally spoken to farmers that are very, very excited for that opportunity, and they will grow better cannabis at scale than most of the cannabis grown today, in my opinion.
Jordan, where do you want to go back?
Yeah, I would just like to say, just to add on to that, Altria has a significant majority, largest investment in Kronos, which is a Canadian-based cannabis company. I think today, probably do the math, they own 48% of Kronos. Kronos made an investment into our company, Altria, back in June of 2021. It was a significant due diligence underwriting process that we went through. The money could not sit on our balance sheet. It had to go directly to our shareholders. But at the end of the day, Altria, vis-a-vis Kronos, initially wound up with a 10.5% kind of zero call option on PharmaCann. So I think that's very, telling of, hey, where is this industry going in terms of how we think about, technologies, supply chain that have been successfully employed in tobacco or other other lifestyle brands, big alcohol, and eventually, where we may find ourselves up as part of a larger lifestyles brand. And then I'd also like to say, my perspective only, but being an active participant in this industry for 2.5 years, each passing day, cannabis is much less of a partisan issue. And I think it was very telling, right? What do markets do best, right? Overreact. So what did the markets do in the Georgia runoffs? They overreacted because they thought, hey, blue state leadership in the Senate, blue state administration, we're going to get full federal legalization. Well, guess what? That didn't happen because it wasn't a priority. And it's not that, I think, if you look at blue and red, there isn't so much of an as it becomes more mainstream each day, I think red state folks are saying, hey, just like everybody else, this is a source of economic growth, economic development. It's a source of tax revenue. And, you know, if you take kind of a libertarian approach, it's probably the right thing to do. It's certainly less harmful to your body than alcohol. And I enjoy alcohol. So, you know, so kind of what's going on. And I think we're increasingly seeing bipartisan support. So I think from a point of optimism, this little spark that lit last week, I think it's going to be pretty exciting. So I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway,
With tobacco specifically too, just to show I guess another show of force. So about a month ago, British American Tobacco's venture arm, BT Ventures, made about a $20 million stake investment in one of our portfolio companies, Open Book Extracts. It took 9 months to get these guys over the line. It's actually the largest investment BT Ventures has made. They don't just exclusively invest in cannabis. In fact, they only just started kind of getting their paws in cannabis companies. But their whole approach here is we recognize that cannabis is going to have an impact on the top and bottom line of our tobacco business. We need to start getting minority stakes into these companies that we want to be involved with. And we're starting to see that already, even at the portfolio level. Question? Got another one?
For Tibby and Jordan, since it's been legal here for 8+ years, has Colorado quantified how much money they've saved on decriminalization by like not incarcerating people for simple possession? Has that been quantified yet?
I sure have. I don't have. That's one of the big reasons people want to like. I'm gonna go back and show you guys the math again, right? So you take a state like Kansas, surrounded by legal marijuana, custody, not enough top that every state crossing stop people from bringing Colorado good weed or Oklahoma or whatever into their state, right? And these states can't stop the black market and spend money incarcerating people. In fact, they could legalize it, make it safer, and get back to the fact that we have I'll check that out.
And the best crime fighting tool for the illicit market, lower the excise tax rate on illegal cannabis. The state of Washington, one of the lowest excise tax rates in these 50 United States, almost wiped out the illicit market, or maybe said another way, they brought the illicit market in. Take Illinois. I love Illinois, that's where I grew up, but you know, very bass backwards. In terms of excise tax, the higher THC potency that you buy, the higher the excise tax. Well, guess what? We've got a right illicit market. People think, why is that legalized? Well, dumbass, we need to lower the excise tax rate. So bring more, grow the pie. And that's for me anyways, I'm very passionate about this. I think there's basic fundamentals that all of us live, work every day and are very passionate about, but there's a big gap, disconnect within our political and governance system. And you know, we need to embrace free markets, embrace free market principles. If you want somebody to stop doing something, well, tax it. If you want to encourage it, right? Reduce the tax. And I think ergo, you know, a much less burden on criminal justice.
Right. So this question is a little bit outside of the scope, but I'm curious if there are synergies with the trends with microdosing psychedelics and the research money going into the therapeutic uses of LSD, psilocybin, things like that. What is it? First question, what is it doing in your opinion to the cannabis industry? And second, is your organization doing that information?
I think it's a competitive threat. And you know, I wouldn't be paranoid if they were not to get me. But in terms of things that we talk about, you know, at board level, at the SLT level, where is the next disruption coming from? And is it from, you know, synthetic cannabinoids? Is it from, you know, mushrooms, etc.? And then, you know, how do we want to play a role in that? So not much unlike General Motors, right? Hey, we've got the gasoline engine. Well, guess what? Something else is coming up, staring down our throats here. So
We look at it similarly in that we were just asked this the other day, will we start lending to psychedelics? And our answer right now is no. Well, why is that? It's not that we don't believe in the kind of promising research it does. It's that from a business perspective, we have a tough enough time raising capital, getting across the line for cannabis. So the minute we do one deal in psychedelics, our entire kind of mandate looks differently. So right now, our point, it's not even worth lending to that industry because it would probably spook the people who are just now getting comfortable with cannabis.
So, sorry.
So Josh is probably not going to love this answer because obviously if cannabis is legalized in the United States, there's going to be more big pharma coming in, more research being done on cannabis as a therapeutic. But I think that, yes, could it be cannibalizing cannabis? A little bit, but in reality, psychedelics are being researched and studied on a pharmaceutical side, and they're on the fast track to being legalized so that doctors can write prescriptions to treat depression, PTSD, et cetera. And cannabis is on a track for recreational legalization. So kind of competing, not really. I think it's just very different, frankly, today from an investment opportunity.
I would almost agree, actually. I would say that it's complementary. I look at it as plant medicine. I think that they're very different plants. I think when I look at cannabis, I mean, listen, we look at cannabis, there are 150 cannabinoids in the plant. Okay, and what we know from a pharmaceutical perspective is it's not just the combination of the different cannabinoids, it's the exact ratios of those combinations. So there are about 1 trillion different combinations available from the cannabis plant, and they all do different things. And we know this much, and the same applies to psilocybin. We know very little about that plant. There's a lot of pharma research happening right now. There's a whole debate right now happening. I know a lot of people in that world that are debating what avenue they're going to go. How do you preserve the rights of indigenous people that have been using this plant for forever? If it becomes pharma, then it will be illegal essentially for them to administer it. Will it be sold in a dispensary? I don't think so, but some people do. But I think that we're finally at a critical point where we're looking at big pharma and saying, well, you guys gave us the opiate crisis. Maybe we should be looking at this differently. Like maybe you guys don't have all the answers. Maybe there's something here that people have been shouting from the rooftops for generations, literally thousands of years. Maybe we should take a look. And so I think it's rising tide.
I think that was probably a good closing remark for Josh, unless you have something else to say. But when I do closing remarks, unless there's like one more burning question. All right, one more and then closing remarks. I don't know what's going on.
Sounds like someone just hit the floor.
Down the stairs.
Yeah, so this is for Patrick. I'm curious from an operator's perspective, what your opinion is on raising capital, whether it's equity or debt, and which one you prefer. Ultimately, which one costs more?
Yes. So that's a joke. Great question.
Yeah.
They're both very costly, and at the end of the day, you got to get the cap structure right. So we had a $150 million senior secured note. We upsized that facility $250 million back at the end of June. I'm out raising capital now on a convertible note, as we view as bridge pre-IPO capital. It's no secret that we'd like to go public. We're ready to go public, but obviously the equity markets aren't. So it's I look at our leverage ratios, where we are today, where I think we'll be vis-a-vis our 2023, 2024, our capital needs. Like, okay, we're Midwest conservative. Hey, we want to keep our leverage ratio under, for next year, less than 1 time. So it's very low leverage. Hey, we can go up a lot more. We think, hey, there's an opportunity here, perhaps when the cannabis public equity markets will open up in 2023. So that's why we think a convertible note is appealing right now. But it was great to be raising equity on that earlier chart when everything was up. So a little bit of it's obviously market kind of dependent. A lot of it is, hey, what's our own comfortable? Where do we want to see our cap structure? And then as the business grows, we certainly don't want to choke off capital, but at the same time, it's great to see capital being choked off in particular states where we are overbuilt, or not we, but where the industry is overbuilt. It's interesting and a bit ironic that, and I'll shut up here, that we're in a country club having this. And again, I love country clubs. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's right. It's like once you're in the country club, well, not everybody else has to come in. That's kind of the dirty little secret about cannabis. That's why prior to acquiring LiveWell in Colorado and Michigan, we operated in highly regulated, limited license states. So once you were in, right, we're in this oligarchy. is it's kind of a
Oligarchy.
bad
You're right,
oligarchy.
Or oligarchy. You're an oligarch.
And, you know, we know that that won't last forever. As the markets open up and with interstate commerce, you know, an eventuality, it's like, okay, we want to, you know, shoot ahead or go to where the puck is going. So it's like, well, we need to be big boys and girls and operate in these unregulated states or unlimited license states. So hence moving in there. So where I was going with that is, you know, from a capital structure perspective, we don't want to constrain capital, but at the same time, I think with this market going through right now and a bit of a thinning of the herd is a really good thing. So,
Awesome. All right. Closing remarks, Russ.
Yeah, I would say that really, we're really starting to read out this show for the fact that incredible that is not yours, that maybe 2 years ago, I think that these guys have been having investors, people, even not ready to play, to start to get smart on it, really understand that there's no behind it, really unfounded, and that very and that
I'd say my closing comments, particularly for this group as advisors and investors, is the cannabis industry is ripe for actual alpha investing opportunities. I know how difficult it is to find, value-added opportunities, and basically because of the confusion and the chaos, that creates the opportunities. For example, right now, because of federal legality and state legality, we are able to make equity-like returns on our loans with bond-like risk. That's a function of an arbitrage between two legal systems that conflict. That entire conflict is creating disruption. And if you do your homework, you can actually have you and your clients be exposed to some really compelling opportunities because of the current state of the industry. There's also lots of ways to lose money, but there are very few industries that kind of have these arbitrage moments, I call it, which will work itself out, where if you do the work, you can make the money. And that's exciting as an investor.
My closing comment would be, it's happening. This is the reality of the world. Cannabis is going to be federally legalized at some point. We're going to have international commerce pushing cannabis back and forth. There are opportunities, and previously, the past couple of years, it would have been way easier to take a bad shot. Now there are more sophisticated operators. There are more states online that are forcing better operators to come into the market from day one, which is good and bad. Sometimes you need a little bit of that old school in order for the new school to really understand what's going on. But the reality is this is happening. Whether you invest in this today or in 3, 5, 10, 15 years, cannabis will be in everybody's portfolio because just like alcohol, it's staying. It's not going anywhere.
Appreciate you guys coming up here and joining us on the panel today. I think everybody in the audience probably learned a lot. Appreciate the audience questions as well. We'll all be.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'm Stephen, the program's chair. We did a luncheon with Key in December of 19, and then we were talking about a follow-up program in February of 20. So it only took us 2.5 years to put this together. So thanks for bringing the panel. Thanks for guys showing up. We have to clear this room, but we have outside, the bar's open, there's appetizers, so please stick around and do some follow-up questions with the panelists. Thank you.